Hi, Laynie Brown.
Hi.
We are in week 3. Welcome to week 3, everyone. And we're standing here in front of the esteemed, venerable Kelly Writer's house. And you can see the sign and the holly. You can't really see much of the house, but it was built in 1851. It really is a house for writers. And this is the home of ModPo. Anyway, week 3. It is our effort to introduce everyone to the idea of modernism and to a little bit of the literary history of the rise of modernism at the start of the 20th century. And we're doing something wrong here in a way because we're not giving you all or many or even some of the literary sub-movements that are part of the rise of modernism. We're using imagism, which is one very brief movement that happened kind of first, as the example. And that's what we're doing. So this gives you a kind of a sense of what the modernists are doing. And it happens in 2 modules, 1 week, week 3, in modules 3 and 4. So don't just do module 3 and stop. You want to go to module 4. So what I want to do is describe what's in module 3, the first part of week 3, and then ask you to comment a little bit about that selection of poets. And then we'll go to module 4, which is the second part of week 3. So in the first part, it's a kind of mini micro anthology of early modernist poets. So Ezra Pound, Wallace Stevens, and Hilda Doolittle, whom we call HD. And so there's tiny little images. So don't be put off by the number of poems, especially in the second half with the William Carlos Williams. There's a lot of poems, and there's short little videos, but they're very tiny. So Pound, HD, and Stevens. How do you reckon those? You know, those are interesting and kind of obvious choices. But do you want to say something about what the experience of encountering their poems might be for people?
Sure. When you said encounter, I just thought of Ezra Pound has a poem, Encounter, which is one of the poems that, like many of these images poems, they're tiny, yet our possibilities for interpretation can be voluminous, stemming from an image.
Yeah, so you have an image and you have a kind of openness to opinions.
Right.
You know, these are not 19th century, mid-19th century American poets who have a lot of opinions.
Right.
Ezra Pound, it turns out, is a poet who had a lot of opinions outside his poetry and in. But at this point, he's writing a poem like The Encounter, where a little thing happens and it's completely open as to what happened.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of context that we can explore, and some of it is in the videos. But first, we invite you just to have this experience of these tiny poems and see what happens when you meet with them.
I think all of us feel that HD is probably the best example of an imagist poet, because she's really resolutely not interested in editorializing or narrativizing what she's describing or what she's denoting.
Right.
The Stevens poem, which is a great poem, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, it's not imagist. Each one of the 13 is imagist, but the totality of it is more cubist. So, oh well. So now, when you go to module 4, so you've got module 3, the first part of week 3, you'll get that smattering, the micro anthology of imagism. But then when you go to module 4, you're reading a bunch of little tiny William Carlos Williams poems. So these are, among them is the famous refrigerator note poem that he wrote for his wife after stealing the plums that she was saving for breakfast. How mean of him to do that. Or another example, of course, is the famous Red Wheelbarrow poem. Let's talk about Red Wheelbarrow for just a second. Why it's so resonant in terms of the art that might be coming later. What do you think about that wheelbarrow poem?
Well, there's the obvious thingness of it, and the fact that probably a lot of people have encountered this poem already in a different context, but when we look at it in terms of what's happening with imagism and what comes later, then there's more possibilities for how we can think about what's happening with it. Appears simple, but it's actually not.
That's really a wise thing to say, Laynie, because it is a famous chestnut of a poem. But when you think about it in the context we're creating, you think about Williams essentially taking a wheelbarrow completely out of context and the chickens, creating a juxtaposition, and in a way stealing these objects, almost the way a radical sculptor, conceptualist Dada sculptor like Marcel Duchamp does when he goes into a hardware store to pick up a shovel, for instance, or a urinal. It's kind of related to that Williams poem.
It is, and probably Williams couldn't foresee that, but the writers that came after certainly were influenced by this reframing of recontextualizing of the wheelbarrow.
And I think that week 10, which is our last week, some of the poets there owe a lot to that idea, the Duchampian idea or the Williams-esque idea of taking something completely unpoetic and saying, this is art.
Right.
This is art. Yeah. So week 3, you'll be peer reviewing people's essays. They will have written these essays during week 2. Week 2, the essay writing in week 2 is about a poem by Emily Dickinson, typically, or Whitman. Each year it's different, right? Almost always Dickinson. You're the one who picks these poems. And then in week 3, you're invited to read the essays that have been submitted during week 2 and go to the forums and do peer reviewing. So, do you want to say something about essay writing and peer reviewing?
Yes. So, of course, there's never a requirement to write an essay on this free online course. However, we hope that you will, because it's a lot of fun, and the conversations that ensue are also a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to read all of the essays, see the different interpretations people have, and comment and encourage each other along, which is really the ModPo way.
Perfectly said. So if 91,000 people who are enrolled in this course as of this recording all wrote essays, we wouldn't be able to do it. But because a couple of thousand people do it, or fewer than that, then what happens is we're able to provide 3 reviews, 4 reviews, 8 reviews. So even though it's a massive open online course, everyone who writes an essay is going to get a personal response, which aligns with our crazy belief that ModPo is a course in which distant learning is proven to be not impersonal. That's the cool thing about that. Well, okay, so now we're going to provide seatbelts for every one of the 90,000 people because week 4 requires you to fasten your seatbelts. We're going to turn from the fairly digestible, plum-eating, wheelbarrow comparing antics of the early imagists, and we're going to move to Gertrude Stein, who might scare some people away from the course.
Don't be scared, though.
But stay. Counterintuitively, you must stay through week 4. You must, because
we
week
invite
4,
you to stay.
We do. Did I say must?
We encourage you to stay.
Yeah, we want you to stay.
We want you to stay.
So here's some cheerleading for Gertrude Stein week 4. So hang on. We don't really provide the seatbelts, but we hope that you will buy your own seatbelts. So terrific. Enjoy week 3.